Laura Foot, welcome to Cultural Attache.
Oh, thank you for having me on your program. Wonderful.
We're talking about Life and Times of Michael Kay, which is going to be at the Wallace in Beverly Hills later this month. And before we start talking about that play in particular, I want to ask you about your TED Talk that you did,
Mm,
which was called Rewriting the Plot of Our Lives.
mm,
And I love the idea that as a young girl, when you saw movies, that you would stay up trying to rewrite a better or happier ending
mhm,
for those movies and wouldn't be satisfied until you figured out how to do that, which has got to be develop a great storytelling skill. But I'm wondering, how does that way of thinking still live within you, not
mm,
just with the work that you do, but how you live your own life?
mm. Well, I'm fascinated by biography and what you bring with you. So, what you bring as an actor, bring onto the stage, or um, how you relate to other people, um, how you relate to your family. But essentially, biography is who you are. Um, And when biographies meet, then drama happens. Um, so yes, I always, I would rewrite movies in my head from when I was probably 4 or 5, and frame by frame, replot them. Not only for happy endings, but also because sometimes I didn't find them credible, and then I would rework them in my head. So that is who I am, and I suppose coming from a country grew up during apartheid, um, and isolated in a very small white society, and then becoming an artist and finding the way of the world and finding out the truth through watching theater really at the Market Theater when I was 17, 18. Understanding how people's biographies are affected, how mine was changed by going into the arts, the people that I met, and I was very, very fortunate. So, and how we change, how we're affected by our context, our politics, how that might change your path. So it always fascinates me.
Which would make Life and Times of Michael Kay a perfect story for you because the protagonist is sort of trying to figure out his place in the world and how to change his story, isn't he?
Yes, I mean, he goes on a journey through this dystopian, war-torn uh, country, which was really fictional in the sense that, Coetzee imagined that. It didn't happen in South Africa, but it could have, the Civil War. And so he works his way through this country um, as a refugee, which of course, resonates worldwide. And really trying to find his freedom or a semblance of freedom. So not having to live under somebody else's rules on either side of the fence, and find a little piece of land where you can live and grow vegetables. Um, Essentially searching for his purpose, a place where you can live. He wouldn't call it home, but we would say home. Um, and all his encounters along the way, trying to get his mother back to her birthplace in the Karoo, um, which is a beautiful, beautiful part of our country. Um, and building a wagon and out of a wheelbarrow and believing that he can get her there, push her there, sort of 250 miles. So this purpose of looking after his mother, and then when she passes away, purpose of scattering her ashes, in her where she was born, in her birthplace, and then the purpose of finding his own freedom in this war-torn country.
But when you read through the book, you must have been a little bit surprised when you came across a passage that says, Your past does not define your future. You have the power to rewrite your story.
Hmm.
It's as if that he tapped right into what you were thinking, even as a young
It's
girl.
I didn't think of it in that way, but you're absolutely right. I mean, and that's Coetzee. When I started adapting it, Um, it's a thin book, it's not even probably 200 pages, if that. And I thought I'd do it quite quickly. I knew what I wanted to do with it. And it took me so long because, these layers of philosophy, and so much can happen within sort of 5 or 6 lines. And what to keep and what to let go of was really, really difficult because of the denseness of his thinking.
Well, it's interesting because the author wrote about his lead character in the book. He says he did not seem to have a belief, or did not seem to have a belief regarding help. Perhaps I am the stony ground, he thought. How does a description like that inform how you go about adapting and creating this work and bringing this life to the stage?
Mm. Well, that's the magic of a puppet, especially a puppet carved by Adrian Kohler. And I'm sure you know his work through, he did the horses on Warhorse. And of course, more recently, Little Amal, he carved her, and I'm sure you've seen her. I think she was in New York about a year ago. So, so you can imbue a puppet with philosophy in a different way, to say how an actor would have to deliver those lines on stage. It might be uh, not that credible or self-conscious from an actor, but when it's spoken through a puppet, the audience leans forward and starts to imagine and engage in these thoughts in a very different way. And of course, the puppeteers, 3 puppeteers on each puppet, imbuing this puppet with life and thinking. Um, so that to me made sense. It's almost like the landscape of Coetzee is etched into that puppet, and he into the landscape. And it's a lot to do with landscape and land and possessing land. And that's why I used film as well. So I filmed the puppet um, walking through the landscape of the Karoo up into the Swartberg, which is basically, in English translation, is the Black Mountains. And so having the puppet in the space to get a sense of that journey and where he was, which is difficult to do on stage. But what was so beautiful for me is the way we filmed it, because uh, you don't usually see puppets um, in film without the puppeteers. So of course we had to make up all sorts of creative ways of how to do that. But also then, you could be sitting in a big audience, 700, 800, 900 people, and you get to experience the puppet close up, which isn't usually the case. So, you have these full shots of Michael Kay, but that landscape and then the landscape of Coetzee's descriptions somehow come together beautifully, as well as with Kyle Shepard's music, which is haunting. And so we developed it over some time. For us, it was quite a privilege. We don't have long rehearsal periods, but we had some time on this, and all those elements, I think, speak to the book.
I grew up watching a different kind of puppetry, whether
Mm.
it was marionettes on strings or traditional, Punch and Judy type of just hand puppet, or even the Muppets. But it seems like in the last number of years, we're more accepting, and it's being more commonly used that we have actors and puppets as one entity on stage. Warhorse was an example. The recent production of Into the Woods, for instance,
Mm.
used actors manipulating, in particular, Milky White, the cow. That's part of it. And it's amazing in all those cases what the actors bring to it, that
Mm.
it's clear it's not just about a puppet, that it's about the totality of that. What is the art of getting that total expression of a character amongst a man-made creature or character and the actors who bring that character to life?
Well, the most important thing is breath. So those puppeteers, if they're three on Michael K, have to breathe pretty much exactly the same time so that they work in unison. And then all three of them, I'm a theater director. I'm not a puppet director. Uh, well, maybe I am now, but I wasn't. And so I have puppeteers that are also very good actors, and there's a sense of imbuing the puppet with real feeling and character. Um, so it takes some time. I mean, that was a big challenge for me when I was directing it because, a scene that could take me half an hour to create on stage with actors might take, a day, a full day to create with the puppet. So it's very painstaking in terms of how detailed the movement is, and then the puppeteers understanding the body of the puppet in a almost like physicians, or psychologists, like where do they hold, where do you hold feeling in your body, and they seem to know that, with the puppet. So yeah, there's a lot of synergy and working together, but always breath, because a puppet is only alive when it's breathing. And of course, it's the puppeteers that breathe that life into the puppet. As soon as you let go of the puppet, it's dead. It doesn't live.
Was puppetry immediately the best way to approach this story? Did that concept come to you quickly?
It was really the other way around. I'd wanted to work with Handspring for so many years. I came across them when I was very young, and I was actually an assistant director to Barney Simon at the Market Theatre. And he did Star Brights with them, which was one of their first sort of known theatre productions. And then over the years, we spoke about doing a production together, and a couple of times it nearly happened. And then finance didn't come through, or something went wrong with the rights. And then, very fortunately, I was commissioned by Theater der Welt Festival in Germany. And they said to me, look, do whatever you want to do. And they had, a sizable budget. And I thought, okay, here's my chance. If Basil and Adrian are available, then that would be great. And they were available. So I said, okay, well, I haven't got anything that I've written that is ready. So I'm going to look at some novels and send them to you. And I sent them two. One was Story of an African Farm, um, and the other was Life and Times of Michael Kay. And Adrian immediately said that was his favorite book. And of course, it lent itself more to puppetry than African Farm. So that's how we came to it. We wanted to choose something that we were going to work on together.
Do you see yourself, doing other projects that employ puppetry? Or is such a high moment for you that it's like,
Mm.
why try to chase the same high?
No, I do, and I am, in fact, doing another one with them. And but I direct. I've just directed an adaptation of Othello, looking at Othello through a kind of a decolonial lens or framework. Um, Not that anything can really truly be decolonized, but having a look at the text in that way. So that was great fun, and then I loved actors again. But but when I work with puppets, then I love puppets again.
Yeah, I hopefully we get to see your Othello because we've got a Broadway production happening um,
Really
next early next year with Denzel Washington and Jake Gyllenhaal.
wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah, I just
But
wonder
it
if
won't be as interesting as my adaptation. I don't think so.
I also think there's something to be said about seeing a play without having to be dazzled by the star power that's on stage. That somehow that takes you a little bit out of the play.
Yeah. I mean, I've been questioning it a lot, because we always taught that it's the tragedy of Othello, because he kills her thinking that she's cheating on him, and then finds out that she wasn't. And that's the tragedy. But that's not the tragedy. The tragedy is that he kills her. That's the tragedy, and that, it doesn't give you a right to kill someone just because they're cheating, even if she was cheating, but that's how we've learned the story. So you could kind of unlearn things.
Right. Absolutely. I agree. Um, you know, I read an interview that the author gave in 1983 about
Mm.
Life and Times of Michael Kay. And he said about his novel, it didn't turn out to be a book about becoming, which might have required that Kay have the ability to adapt, more of what we usually call intelligence, but about being, which merely entailed that Kay go on being himself despite everything. It sort of
Mm.
feels like there's a good lesson to be learned in that basic approach, isn't there?
Mm. It's really about essence, and about how little one needs to survive. Really cutting through the greed and politics that's out there and the darkness. It's kind of leaning into the darkness as well, which Coetzee always does. But I think in our play, it's the way we hold the darkness that, gives us a little glimmer of hope around humanity, although that's hard to find these days.
But you grew up in a country where you grew up in a time of complete darkness,
Yes.
in South Africa. It's like,
Mhm.
how did you hold on to your humanity during that?
Well, for me, it was easy. For me, it was easy. Mm, for a lot of people, it wasn't easy to hold on to humanity. Um, and the time I was at university, which was in the late 80s, was a time of, when people were protesting. So you could get really involved. And there was huge hope because we believed that we would become a democracy and we believed that Mandela would be released. So there was a time of hope, I suppose naively, maybe from my side, because I hadn't experienced what so many had. But yeah, that's I guess how we held on was being essentially part of the struggle.
But it's also, as an artist, something that, I mean, emotion, we artists, based on the countless artists with whom I've spoken, you know, tend to believe that they feel more deeply, that they that you know that they have a more emotional response to a lot of things than people who maybe aren't artists. And that's not to discredit anybody else. But I'm just wondering, as somebody who, I mean, you knew you were an artist when you were four. If you're reworking movies, you're already an artist at that point. I'm just wondering, obviously you were not black in South Africa during this time, but
Mm.
the empathy that I think an artist has, was that did that make what was going on feel more omnipresent for you, even though you weren't directly suffering at the hands of apartheid?
Yes. I mean, we were covered by it. We were suffocated by it. It was hard not to see it absolutely everywhere and feel quite helpless, really. Um, you can feel helpless about so many things that are going on in the world right now, and I think people do. But yes, you couldn't, I mean, every day was about that, and if your friends are suffering in that way, or your neighbors, or, you know, um, and I guess as artists, you try and sort of relay that, especially over that period, because there was so much protest theater. It was like theater was the living newspaper, because there was censorship in the press, but theater somehow got the word out internationally as well. I mean, shone a light on the issues in South Africa. So you felt that you had to engage with these stories, however horrific, and empathize with the people to make some kind of a difference, And I think I'm still like that, I think most artists, theatre people are. They believe strongly in something and they want to share that. They want to
Well, and
have
part of your
dialogue.
sorry, go ahead.
No, you want a dialogue about it. You want people to sort of be engaged rather than feign shock, you know.
Well, I saw an interview that you gave Serafina magazine in 2016 where you said that you believe very much in storytelling as a means to healing, as a means to integration, and I suppose some sense of a healthy society in the future. One
Mm,
could argue that the society that you grew up in and came out of is, required healing. And you could also argue that the society we live in now, and we're having this conversation the day after the presidential election in the United States, that
mm,
we're maybe globally reaching some really unhealthy moments. What do you see as your main priority in a world on fire to develop and present stories that can do precisely the healing you talked about?
mm. We go back to biography then, telling your stories. And we had the Truth Commission after democracy, and I mean it was an extraordinary thing. There's some criticism of it in terms of what did people get out of it financially. There was no sort of payback as such. Um, but the the ability to come and tell your story, um, and also to look into the eyes of your perpetrator, that's empathy. That's empathy from the storyteller. It's one thing to say, well, I forgive, but you can't really forgive. It's not in your power to forgive and everything will go away, but you can have empathy. And I mean, that was, I think, incredible thing that happened in South Africa, and led by Bishop Tutu and Nelson Mandela, and some friends of mine that I've only later in life made friends with. Um, but in the world today, I talk with some academics about maybe finding a different voice for theatre, where we combine academic research with storytelling in a way that we try and articulate things differently, because you have so many people doing research papers, academics doing research papers. It might be on violence or crime or rape. And then, then we as artists do plays about that, and they're frustrated that the world's not changing, and we're frustrated that the world's not changing. And maybe there's another way to articulate what we feel. I mean, seeing what is happening in the US today after your elections, I mean, that just reminds me so much of what has happened in South Africa and where we came from. It's, for us, or certainly in my circle, it's quite shocking um, to go backwards in that way, because, we came to this place where we have this fabulous constitution, and it really is an excellent constitution. And I was thinking today, we have a law against hate speech, which I don't think you have, or it doesn't appear to us that you have something like that. But on the other hand, I talk like that, but the poverty in our country is extreme. Nearly 40% of people out of work. So there's a lot still to be done here. Mm.
I think there's a lot to be done everywhere, truth be told.
Mm.
Now, Michael Kay cuts ties with the world. He doesn't want to deal with what the world has become, particularly after the death of his mother.
Mm.
Um, you know, there are a lot of people who don't want to deal with the world now. I mean, they don't vote, as in yesterday, because the voting was down considerably in this country, or they don't want to worry about it because it doesn't affect them personally. Do you think that there is an additional layer of topicality that this story is going to have now, particularly in the United States, that it might not have had the election gone a different way?
I would think so. I do think so. I mean, when we started it, the war in Ukraine had just started. And then, of course, that resonated when we came onto stage, especially internationally. And something else will resonate now, that's for sure. Um, you know, just in terms of our group, who's telling the story, that's going to be interesting, I think. Excuse me. And this search for freedom, I mean, there's slogans, from democratic, you know, campaign that you hear in the play, not because we wrote them in, because they're there, just this search for freedom. Although he doesn't necessarily use the word freedom, it's more a concept around freedom. Free from all the gatekeepers, free from being a servant or being told what to do by somebody, anybody. Um, and also from, he was judged so badly when he was a child for having this hair lip that excuse me, that he has to find a freedom from that cruelty.
It's interesting because I reread some of the reviews of the book, and Sam Jordison, who was writing in The Guardian in 2009, said that Michael Kay was more of a plot device than a real man. Do you agree? Do you agree with that? And I brought that quote up because I like the idea of making him a real man vis-a-vis puppetry. It sort of feels like, maybe you could be coming at the same thing from different points of view.
Oh, that's a difficult one. I'm not sure. Um, a real man. I don't really even know what that means, a real man. Um, a human being who's going, uh, through, there's an odyssey, I mean, he goes on this journey and he has these adventures. Um, it's fictional, of course, so is that real? Um, and then as a puppet, I feel he's real, and I think the audience will feel he's very real. As a plot device, I don't think Coetzee cares about that, plot devices. Um, that's my feeling about his work. His work is difficult, it's dark. And this one less so than his other works.
Yeah, because if you read through the book, there are all kinds of things that sound like you could put them as post-its on your refrigerator, on your desk somewhere to sort of help you get through any given crisis or any given day.
Maybe. I mean, or not send you the other way, right?
That's true.
Into the darkness. I mean, I only deal essentially with the first chapter of the book. I don't I don't deal with the second chapter at all. And I felt it unnecessary. I felt it was seeing Michael through the eyes of a white doctor, which was explaining the book too much for me. And perhaps one needed to do that in 1983, sort of justifying the thoughts on Michael. But um, when I adapted the book, I had to send my first version to Coetzee because he had to pass it to give me the rights. And I was terrified. And he's not that conversational, and he's known to be kind of, you know, difficult person to speak to. I think he's shy actually. And so I sent him the script and I said, look, I've left out the second chapter, and it feels like it works. The story works in this way. And I was terrified that he was going to say no. And he said, oh, that's a good choice. I agree with you. So I think some of your quotes now actually were from that second chapter.
Right.
Mm, yeah.
Right. Well, let me finish where we started, which was the idea about rewriting our stories and rewriting the plot of our lives. Given everywhere we are as we're, facing down the start of 2025, how do you think we can collectively rewrite the plot of our lives right now and come up with a happier ending than it appears we're facing as a possibility right now? And can an artist, can the arts help us get there?
One has to pray to whoever you pray to for empathy. I mean, only when you put yourself in someone else's shoes can you feel. I mean, what's going on in Gaza and Israel, I mean, it is so devastating for me and for the world to see, the cruelty all around, and whether it's the hostages or the children of Gaza, or everyone. It's just so cruel, and until people can see that, see themselves in others, um, I mean, it's really happened. It's a miracle what happened in South Africa, absolute miracle how, and it wasn't just Mandela, how somehow there was a bigger sensibility or uh, a vision, such a extraordinary vision of what hope looked like, of what uh, possibilities looked like. And it wasn't just verbalized, it wasn't just a slogan, but put into practice, thought through. Um, and as I said, we've still got major issues with poverty, but there was a philosophy that everyone worked towards. And it was about goodness. It wasn't about the other. It wasn't about division. It was about coming together.
So do you think those are the stories that we need most now, or the stories that bring us together?
I don't think that will happen. I mean, artists try. Um, there's got to be another device, I suppose. But stories will help. Films help. Theater helps. Everything works towards something. I certainly will keep doing it, and I'm sure millions of artists will keep doing it. And one hopes, as I said, for an engagement. Once people engage, they don't push away. They don't say, "Oh, that's not me. That's the other." Oh, shock! Look how those people are. It's more an engagement. I did a play about infant rape, about a 9-month-old child that was raped, supposedly by 6 men, and that turned out it was one man. And when I started it and I went into all the research about infant rape, which was becoming a huge thing in South Africa, the numbers were just growing and growing of these horrific incidents, tragedies, not incidents. When I did all the research and I, leant into that darkness and started to understand possibly where it was coming from, nobody wanted to see the play. Nobody wanted to give me funding, of course. But as people started to engage one by one, and we started with an audience of like 3 people, and we built it up to it's now studied as a set work, and we toured a lot internationally. As they engaged, they felt in themselves a kind of a healing, because now they were part of it. And that's how the students would speak to me about it, that they, now they were part. And it's what I felt when I first saw plays at the Market Theatre when I was 17. I didn't know what was going on in our country. I saw these plays and I was like, okay, I'm a part of it. I'm part of making something better. So I think theatre does do that.
Well, I, for one, am very much looking forward to seeing Life and Times of Michael Kay. The videos that I've seen of it are incredible, and I think it's going to be an incredible journey for anybody who makes their way over to the Wallace.
Wonderful. Thank you. We can't wait to be there.